Welcome to the SnapScale Show, hosted by Mike Yablonowitz and Nathan Bush. In every episode, we explore the real challenges and breakthroughs happening in modern healthcare operations, from navigating compliance to virtual staffing and emerging technology. You will hear real stories from clinics, learn from healthcare leaders, and uncover practical strategies that help you run a smoother, more efficient practice, without losing focus on what matters most: patient care. SnapScale exists to take the pressure off your front office and administration work, so you can get back to doing what you love. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get the latest episodes, and visit snapscale.com to learn more. Let's simplify healthcare operations together. This is the SnapScale Show.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Yablonowitz, and I am the president and CEO of SnapScale. Here we are, another wonderful show. For everybody that hasn't been to one of these before, this is a way that, kind of an answer to our clients, right? They're always looking for new and different ways to kind of run their practice. And as much as our core competency is to provide them with HIPAA-compliant virtual assistants, again, the one thing that we strive ourselves and we relish in is the fact of always trying to find different ways to help them do the other stuff that a lot of them talk to me they don't want to do, other than provide the patient care, right? And one of the ways we've been able to give back is to do these webinars, to provide more information that they were always looking for. We've done shows such as showing people how to do their finances better, and things like that. But today it's really cool because this actually came from talking to a client actually last week, and this happens a lot, is when we talk about the things that they need help with to push their practice forward, a lot of times we get into the discussion around how to be great, right? I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, and a lot of our clients, doctors and clinicians out there, are the same things, right? And what starts out is talking about the things that they're missing in the back office and the front office, talks about like their fears and what keeps them up at night and what the hardest things are to running a business. And I was talking to Nathan and said, this is really an important thing to kind of go over and to talk about. And yeah, it's cool if we learn about like the accounting practices and how to do better with AI scribing and all this other cool stuff that pushes their business forward. Like what I always know personally is that to be in a good mental state is what really is the difference between my business and me being great and being good. So I said that we have to have somebody on this show that can talk specifically about how to work through yourself and make yourself better and a better mindset, because when that happens, you do better as a practitioner. I don't care if you run a BPO like I do, a web hosting company, or you're a doctor. Positive mental state is the difference between success, not necessarily failure, but mediocrity. And none of us is striving for that. So today I am excited to bring on the show. I don't like usually calling it show, but Evan Marks, who is a performance coach, for lack of a better term. He spent over 20 years on Wall Street, and now spends his time coaching high-end people on how to do just that, how to be able to be better by using psychological tricks is the wrong term, Evan. I know that, but be able to use things to be able to make you better on a ground. I said this was going to be a great show, and I'm ruining the whole intro, Evan. But
I gave you a script. What happened?
I need a script. That's what we're trying to do. This live, but really to try to make you better. And he spends his whole time working with people on how to make them better. So I figured this would be a great thing to bring to the show, and hopefully some of the things that he talks about will resonate in the conversation that we've had with the clients And on that note, I'll bring up our esteemed Nathan Bush, who's the Senior VP of Growth at SnapScale and the one that runs all of these webinars and shows. Nathan, take it away, man. What do we got going on?
Well, I appreciate that, Mike, and thank you, Evan, for joining the show. Now, Evan, you actually have been able to coach NASCAR pit crews and Wall Street high-end traders who are stressed out of their mind and be able to get them into a good peak state to do work. How do you do that, man?
Well, Mike, thanks for the botched intro. I really appreciate doing that. Friendship right out the window. But so basically what I do, I'm a mental performance coach, and I work anywhere from, NASCAR drivers and pit crew teams to pro athletes, C-suite executives, and Wall Street, where I spent most of my career before jumping into coaching arena about 8.5 years ago. And it's interesting, my practice is the marriage between the why and the how. So you take psychoanalytical theory, which is Freud, meets the latest research in neuroscience. And so how do we actually marry the why do we do what we do? And how do we get better? How do we go from good to great? So what it's based on is my job is to bring the unconscious conscious, and through repetition, become unconsciously conscious, which sounds like flow. So when you talk about anywhere from athletics to business to Wall Street, we are all in the game of making decisions. So my job is always, how do we make the best decisions possibly in the moment, right? I'm not saying they're the right decisions because only time tells that, but how are we making decisions consciously, right? Because we know that anytime we make a decision, there's an emotion behind it. But how do we separate without dismissing emotions so we can make the best decisions we can? Whether that's, like I said earlier, in athletics, business, or Wall Street. So I'm the guy that comes in who starts to understand how people behave and try to really change that and build new circuitries in the brain where we're able to make better, conscious, in the moment decisions. So we're more visible and we're actually propelling our organization, our team, or whatever profession you're in.
Yeah, Evan, clinics right now, they're overwhelmed from, I know inflation's kind of tapered off a little bit, but they're still overwhelmed from some of the rising costs, staffing issues, insurance pressures. And the old ways that they were doing things, they're just working harder. And that working harder seems to be broken for a lot of the clinics that we work with. And I know that you're a big proponent of evidence-based growth. And I know we're going to get into that in the show today. However, I know that our brains are wired a certain way. We get wired or rewired. And can you kind of explain what the clinics are feeling certain things right now? Why are their brains wired to feel that way?
It's clinicians. It's so many different industries that when we feel pressure, we go into a fight or flight, right? And fight or flight is often based on reacting. And reacting is reacting events from the past. What the greatest thing you can do is respond. So what does respond look like? So at M1, we always talk about you have to slow down in order to speed up. Now, slowing down doesn't mean you're taking your foot off the gas. It's actually becoming more intentional with the decisions that we want to make. So in this fast-moving environment, right, it seems like the economy, news is coming out every 2 seconds, and it's very difficult to make decisions. So instead of reacting, the people I train, we put mental space between, listen, you're allowed to feel whatever you want. Why wouldn't you be nervous? Why wouldn't you be panicked? Why wouldn't you have a little anxiety about the future? Of course you should. It's a human experience. But what if I was to say to you that you're allowed to feel however you'd like? Give yourself permission. But remember one thing, we also have the ability to put space between how we feel and then how we choose to behave. And Nathan, what's interesting about that is that at any age, I'm 53, right? And we know through research, the brain stops developing at 25. But in actuality, through neuroplasticity, we can always change the makeup of our brains. So if you feel a certain way, you put space, we add a different behavior, it creates a new experience. Like when I was nervous, I used to run away out of this or that. But now I put space, I'm able to stand my ground and make a decision. That's a new experience. And when you do that repetitively, you start building new circuitry in the brain. So as opposed to I used to do this, through repetition, that new default is the new circuitry you're building. That's consciousness. So when you talk about clinicians in the environment we're in, you always want to have the ability to slow down. Take the external data that's coming at you, right? We obviously have internal data, our own past experiences, our own traumas, our own anxieties about the future, and give yourself that space to not react, but to respond instead. Reacting is literally fight or flight. But when we give ourselves that space, a couple seconds, we're able to make a better conscious decision. And that's important in any arena that I coach, any arena that I've invested in. It's such an important thing to really think about.
You know, what you're talking about is intentionality and being intentional and understanding what's going on in our head. And I know smart clinic owners get stuck. They know they need to change. Why don't they take, let me ask you from my own personal perspective. Why is it that sometimes I get stuck in business? I know I need to change and I don't make the change.
But listen, the familiar is always easy, right? You know, what do they always say? Nothing changes if nothing changes. Change is very uncomfortable, right? And we've heard it through all social media. You got to be uncomfortable, all that type of stuff, but there's truth to it. So one of the most important things is when you want to change, you can't think about change, right? You have to verbalize how you want to change. So let's say I have a coaching business and I want to do more stage work. I want to be able to do this. I can't just think about the things I want to do. I have to be able to verbalize them, write them down, say them. Because when we're able to verbalize the things that we want to accomplish, we actually start to see it. Even though you can't see the words you're saying, it's actually leaving the darkness and coming to the light. So now as we say it, we kind of pick it up on it somatically, right? We can feel it, we can hear it. And there's so many different ways, but when we just think about change, it doesn't work that way. And the other thing is that change is scary, right? Because there is no guarantee about what's to happen. So how do you start to trust yourself when we do make change?
Yeah.
Small steps. Small, right? Who are we hiring? Are we hiring smartly? Am I take one little arena that you want to change and start with that. Because then, as you start to build, change starts to compound. And then all of a sudden, like, how can that small little thing I just did, whether it was hire somebody or fire somebody or make a decision, how does one step create this ripple effect of change? Right? People always think about change, it's got to be big. It doesn't have to be big. It could be this small little nuance that some people may think is inconsequential, but it's not. It starts the wheels of momentum.
Yeah, you're talking about small changes, small steps, a small step forward. Is it easier to take small steps in your opinion, or is it better sometimes if companies are seeing issues? If you're a clinic and let's say our clinic is not bringing in enough clients right now. We're struggling to meet payroll right at this very second. I have massive fear about making the change. Is it important in that environment to make a massive change and make a major shift? Or should they start taking small steps and small shifts and changes?
Oftentimes when you have to make big changes fast, small changes were needed earlier, right? So when you think of it like that, when you make big seismic changes, it's extremely scary. And it scares the culture as well. So I'm not saying that change can't happen on a sized level, because it can. But if you really want consistency and building a strong foundation for your business, there really has to be this conscious thought as a leader in your organization on a daily level. How do we get better? What needs to change? So of course you can make seismic changes. But the question is, how consistent and steady can that be? Small changes over the course of time create massive impact.
And you go back, one thing I just want to go back to, you said something in the beginning that, I'm very familiar, taking space. It all starts there, because a lot of times that what Nathan brought up is a big thing. Oh, I have to make a big change, right? And that's what a lot of these people get into. And, in just taking space and really being able to do something a little bit different, so you look at things a little different, you don't have to make a lot of times you don't have to make a seismic shift, right? And you have to look things through a different perspective. Can you just please talk about the space part, taking space? What does that mean to me as a small business owner, right? What do I have to do to take space, and what's the payoff? It really is tremendous.
So, it's interesting when we talk about seismic change, just to go back to that, right? It's called the law of addition by subtraction. Oftentimes you could take things out of the equation that have profound impact, right? Because when I look at performance as an equation, performance equals potential minus interferences. Now that's interferences on a personal level, and that's interferences on a business level. So if you want to go lose weight and you want to go to the gym 17 times a week and do all these crazy things, how about just cut out the cookies to start? Imagine the impact that has. So if you take that sort of little mindset and you bring it to the business, all right, I had to make seismic changes. Wait a second. Let me put let me give myself some space here. Let me go take a walk for a second. All right. What am I trying to accomplish here? So when we start asking ourselves exploratory questions verbally, like I just did, you start to become more conscious of what you're trying to achieve. So if I own a clinic or whatever the business may be, and for this topic, it's clinicians, start asking yourself questions. Okay, what are we trying to accomplish here at the clinic? Where is my revenue coming from? How do I need to organize my people to bring out the best in them, right? Because when we want to make seismic change, we are often just reacting, as opposed to first sitting back. Do I need to hire SnapScale to do certain things? Like Michael and I just did something with a client of mine, right? Now he could have made this seismic shift. I'm like, wait a second, let's put some space here, because now you're reacting. Why don't we have a conversation and talk this through? What are we trying to accomplish? Where are our pain points? Okay, what are some ideas that we can come up with that can help us? So this little conversation that I'm having with myself right now, but if you have it with yourself, it's giving you this space, as opposed to being impulsive about making dramatic changes. Because, Nathan, procrastination isn't the lack of effort. It's the fear of a future feeling. So when you asked me earlier about change, it's not that people are lazy. It's that there's an undertone of fear of something behind it, right? So now as we go on these self-exploratory questions, we start asking ourselves, or we ask our team, but it has to be explored. And quite frankly, and I'm going to use Mike an example again. We sat down with my client and we had this in-depth conversation about, where is the pain? What should we be doing? How do we accomplish this? So instead of rushing, put space, start asking questions. Questions are powerful. And that's also a great way to get into that consciousness.
And I'll just double on that, because you brought that up, because a lot of people think that they need to make big changes, to make shifts. Even when we speak to clients at SnapScale, right? They're like, oh, we can't find anybody. We need to do this. Okay, hold on one second. Just like we did with the client there. You don't need 8 people. In fact, you know what? Right now, you don't need anybody, because if you bring anybody else into this dysfunctional family, it's going to be a disaster. So just like we did with the client, let's take a step back. And it is interesting. It's space and it's breathing, right? You actually
Yeah,
told them to breathe.
it's true though. But listen, just real quick,
true.
Mike.
Yeah.
When we're in fight or flight, bad place to make decisions. Unless a saber-tooth tiger's coming at you and you got to do something and react, I get it. Yeah. But when we're in the parasympathetic, which is rest and digestion, and literally that's a couple breaths get you right there, is the best place to make decisions. So when we talk about mental performance, it's really down regulating your body, because in a heightened sense, even though there's pressure on us, there are ways to down regulate simple breathing to make a better decision. I need 8 people. You don't need 8 people.
No,
you don't even know what you need, but you are feeling panic, and now your decision making is hijacked. Take a step back. Let's ask a couple questions and watch what happens to the person you're speaking with. They seem to shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also with the same thing, it's not. To be clear too, this is a large 100+ year firm. That this isn't a small company. So like I was saying, and I was telling one of our clients the other day, you're not the only one that has problems. It's all over the place. And with this specifically, right, the guy said, I need all these people. We said, take a step back. Let's look at your org chart. Let's see how you're properly set up. And let's then look at it a different way, right? Let's look at where we're going to plug people in. And in reality, we found out he wasn't necessarily utilizing all the right people the right way. And yes, he had to add more people, but it wasn't what he mentioned, what he thought initially. But also at the end of the day, when the big thing that, and Evan's taught me a lot too, is you also have to, this is my, but you also have to go out of, as I like to say, your ghetto, right? You have to talk to other people, because it's sometimes hard to see, as they say, like the forest from the trees. So if this guy didn't reach out to Evan, and this isn't a pitch for Evan, this is a pitch for anybody it's always a pitch for Evan. I love Evan, but it's competent and that can really help your process. An outsider looking in is massively needed for things, because you may think it's a seismic shift because you're stuck in this place, but someone else looking in that gives you a couple of ideas can automatically make you see things differently. And in this case was a perfect situation. So, it's really about being able to see things through a different perspective from someone that knows, what they're doing. So I thought that was important to kind of bring up, because the space and the breathe, people are probably laughing out there, but breathing, like I literally breathe like more than ever before. Literally.
But you know what also, Mike, it's, if I can add to that, right? We all have emotions. We have triggers, right? Now, we all could have a conversation. We could be in a meeting and John could say something to me and trigger me, right? And it's got nothing to do with John, but it's something from my past. But the fact that this is why breathing is just consciousness. That means we're picking up on something that's going on internally and we're able to slow it down. That's awareness in its essence, right? And also, Mike, what you're saying is very important. I deal with a lot of companies, and what I find more often than not is that in the beginning, and Nathan, this goes to you, when we're making changes, we have to ask for help. Mm-hmm. When we are caught up in our day-to-day routines, we sometimes can't see the trees through the forest, right? Sometimes we need a different spotlight. We need somebody to help us see it in a different way. And when you're good and you want to be great, you need help. Wherever that may be, whether that's exercise, which you get into your body, let your mind relax, whatever it may be, what got you here won't get you where you want to go sometimes. So when you're dealing with environments that are ever changing, right? Going, in the next 3.5 years, there could be massive uncertainty. We have to be really comfortable with the uncertainty because we can't control that. However, we have to be really confident in how we behave. That's the only thing we can bank on. Can Nathan, under pressure, give themselves space to make the best decisions possible. That's really the lane you want to be in. I don't want to be impulsive. I don't want to be reacting. I want to be able to be responding, proactive, and being able to almost like think of Tom Brady. I want to be able to sit in the pocket, have a chance to see what's going on, and then make a play, make a decision, make a bet, whatever it may be. That, when I say slowing it down, right? And then give me one more second with this. And then what happens is, we always say consistency with evidence builds confidence. So now we know when there are hard decisions to make, when there is change needed, wait a second, I've done this before. I have evidence to show that I've been consistently making very good decisions because I'm able to slow down. I'm able to see the environment and not react to it. That's mental performance in any arena.
When I was younger, I played a lot of different sports. I played football. I played baseball. I was a volleyball player. Not one time did I really get better on my own in a team sport. Nathan was never going to be good enough, no matter how much I practiced, without the team, but more importantly, without the coach directing the team. And I think so many people in this world, Evan, they go through life and they try to do their team sport. Even though they're the captain, they try to do their team sport on their own. Why do you think so many people reject the idea of making a small change and bringing a coach in early into their business?
Well, now we can talk business. I always say cost versus value. Coaching's not cheap, right? So there's a cost to that, but there's a value also. So when people are short-sighted, right? And listen, you can't live in people's wallets, can't live in their corporate bank accounts. But what happens is that when we know something's wrong, we keep repeating the same behaviors and expecting a different outcome, right? Which is the definition of insanity. We think down the road it's going to change, but it doesn't. So why not in the beginning start to build a strong mental foundation? Now, it's very hard to measure, to quantify an ROI on making early mental investments. Qualitatively, it could show up in different arenas. But what happens is you start to make better decisions. So when you're a young company or you have cash constraints, you have to decide what you want to do. But even in that little arena, whether you have a coach or not, what I'm saying now is that take a walk, go to the gym, start breathing, do certain things that will really prime your mental capital so you can make better decisions, right? I'm obviously a massive proponent for coaching. Like, no shit, right? But I know the effect because I've had coaches my whole life, right? And it's interesting is that when you get people on the same page about mental health, about mental performance, about decision-making, about consciousness, what happens is you start to create a very strong culture. And we know that strong cultures breed exceptional performance. Why? Why is that? Well, there's certain needs in any community. We need to feel supported. We need to feel heard. And we need to feel important, right? And being important is like, we care about you, right? We don't hire family. It's a business still. It's a team. But when we talk about decision-making, and when you work with CEOs of companies, it is a trickle down. How is the team, how is the leadership making the best decisions they can? And that's really being more conscious about triggers, emotions, fear of, past pain, anxiety into the future, right? Because the brain's always predicting into the future. So how do we able to work with people, the people you work with, and slow them down? Have a conversation. Give them support so they can make better decisions.
Yeah, I'm a father. I know Mike's a father. Evan, I don't know your family situation, but
2 daughters.
Wonderful. It's amazing. And I love being a dad. I absolutely love being a dad. And I think, being a dad is really, it's busy because my daughter plays volleyball. She took 3rd in the world with ATA Taekwondo. Like, she's always on the go in tournaments, doing different things. And the most impactful time I have as a father is when we do slow down. And it's those days where we're having those 2-hour deep conversations that actually have the biggest impact. I see it in my daughter's life the very next day. When I can sit down and help her process what she's going through, it shows up in her life.
Well, it's important. You said something very important. I think this is good for everybody. And I have 2 teenage daughters. Now we're talking about parenting for a second, but I think this is universal. I know growing up, it was almost like if you had feelings, put them aside, shove them down, and just suck it up and move, right? There's bigger things going on in the world. Screw your feelings, just keep going. And we know what happens. It becomes Chernobyl at one point. The greatest gift you can give to your children or people you work with, right? The permission to feel. When, I wouldn't have a job if parents, when they raised their children, told their kids, feel whatever you want and actually label those feelings. I feel sad. I feel angry. I feel this way. Because when we're able to actually speak about our feelings and put labels to them, it gives a better coping mechanism going forward. As opposed to, Johnny, you shouldn't feel that way. Don't feel that way. Don't be angry. That's what you're actually doing is you are not validating, right? We can go into validation. This will turn into a Freudian episode, but we aren't validating our children. We're saying, well, that's not how you should feel. You don't feel that way. So what happens is I get busy now with 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds who haven't been validated as children, right? So now we are all looking for what? External validation. But we know the most important thing is internal validation, our internal footing. So public message, and all parents out there, let your kids feel and let them say it. Yeah. But it's true though, but even when you talk about business, like where are these decisions coming from? Well, we know through psychoanalytical theory that we are programmed as infants, pre-verbal even. So all this coding is going on. So oftentimes we are making decisions as adults, as leaders, as business owners, unconsciously. Amazing, right? And the question then is, how do you bring the unconscious conscious? And that is space. That is really slowing down to recognize and become visible in the moment. I could talk about that.
I got to ask a question.
It's great stuff.
This is, to be clear, I wouldn't be close to as successful, and that's to be determined. Actually, I'm not sure what successful means yet, but without talking to others, like seriously, this is important. But again, when you're saying that we hadn't had a chance to feel in our generation, it's the truth. It really is, and just being able to have that and open up and talk to people that can help you see and make it okay before you know it, things start working better. It's just an amazing, it's an amazing.
So Mike, let me add to that. Really, it is amazing because like we said in the beginning of this conversation, you have to acknowledge emotions. You have to acknowledge how you feel. But what's interesting now is the how. Now we start adding new behavior, right? Well, I used to react when I was scared of, I didn't want to go on stage. I was fear of judgment. All right, let me see what would happen if I get on stage, right? And I say, I feel like I'm going to be judged, and I do it anyway. So now all of a sudden there's a why. Why do we do what we do? And now, wait a second. what happens if I tie a new behavior to how I feel, right? As a child, when I was scared, I can't behave the same way as an adult, right? I have more responsibilities. So how do I consciously start choosing behaviors in the face of, not dismissive of, emotions? So now, as we consciously choose how we want to behave, our brains start neuroplasticity.
Mhm.
Our brain starts to rewire itself. So now, through repetition, as a parent, as a business owner, as a coach, as anybody, we start to change. So it doesn't have to be seismic changes. It could be these little tweaks with consistency. And in 6 months, you look back and you're like, how did we get here? How is it possible that all these little steps got me here? One, you start to trust yourself. You start to see it, right? Remember, progress is elusive. You know, as a coach, I could see it more than clients in the beginning, right? The way they speak is different. How they slow down is different. But all of a sudden, when you start to pick up on this, you are way down the field now. But it really has to be intentional. You have to say, what needs to change? What am I trying to accomplish? And how can I do it?
Yeah, Evan, in your online content, you said that curiosity is the fastest way around fear. Can you unpack that a little bit for me and help me better understand that?
I'll be doing a 10X talk on that, by the way. Little plug-in. So think about curiosity, right? Is what if. So let me just rewind for a second. We always talk about fear of embarrassment, judgment, rejection. But we really know one of the highest intense feelings we have is something called regret. So now when we talk about curiosity, now curiosity in its essence is just information seeking, right? So when we get curious, right? So now we know psychoanalytically we have something called resistance, right? There's things that happened in the past that we are resistant to, right? Where we can't make changes because we're so programmed a certain way that we don't even know why we can't do it. It's trauma from the past or whatever it may be. So now through the art of curiosity, I said, hey, Mike, you know what? I'm going to start a coaching business. I wonder what it will look like. Now, obviously, can I fail? Of course I can fail. Can I succeed? Of course I can. But what happens when you start to get curious, the fear of failure diminishes. Because it's obviously there's a possibility, but also there's a possibility of success. As you reframe that through curiosity, what happens is the resistance don't go away. I'm not saying they go away totally, but almost the walls of resistance start to come down. Because, all right, I may fail. Hey, Mike, why don't we, okay, I'm curious to see what would it look like? What would it feel like if we did this? So obviously the door of failure is sitting wide open, right? Just by saying that. But what happens is it's almost like the game of tug of war is over. Like you let go of the rope and you see. So that is not dismissive of emotions. It is not dismissive of fear of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's really being curious. Let's get some information. So now that tackles regret, right? We tried. But what happens there is, and this, I'm going to circle back. This is why small changes are important. You've already come out of your comfort zone. That small little change kind of puts a little confidence, a little bit of evidence that, you know what? I'm not scared. I can do things in the face of, and then all of a sudden that momentum begins. So the art of curiosity doesn't get rid of resistance, but it definitely softens it, right? I wonder, what would it like? What if, right? What if we get into healthcare? I don't know. Let's go see, right? We know we have good work ethic. We know we put a lot of effort in. We know we can stay focused and intentional. Let's go see. And then shocker, it worked. Get out of here. But it's literally just the narratives we tell ourselves. Let's go see. It's almost like, let's go fail and see what happens. But what happens is that's not what happens. You start to put the evidence that you have because you built the business, and then the world of what's possible starts to open up. It's really fascinating.
Evan, you help people get curious all the time in their business. I want you to think and put yourself in a doctor's shoes for a second. I'm curious about the answer to this question. So I want you to put yourself in the doctor's shoes. How do they get their patient more curious about the results of their treatment if the patient is resistant to the treatment?
Well, let's roll that back for a second. So now the patient may not want to know what's going on, right? People don't go to doctors because they don't want to know, right? I'd rather not know than know, right? I'd rather not know than know, exactly. I'm the opposite. I'd rather know everything. So then how do we frame it in a way, right? Let's say curiosity. How does a doctor, because a doctor is there to help, right? But listen, we all have fear, right? You know, my mother had cancer, right? Alzheimer's, all these things. So why am I going to go do a mental makeup of my brain? What happens if I have it? So how do we start to reframe and saying, what are the right steps in our communication with clients? How is preventative medicine? How is whatever the doctor does, whatever practice activities does, how do we communicate it better to the client that this is actually here to support you? I think it's important that we do these things so we can see if there is anything that we can help you with. So how do you disarm, right? Because it's scary when you hear scary news or the possibility of. But how do you disarm a patient and have them become more curious? Or have them become more, and it's not positive psychology, but how do you have them become a part of the treatment with you? How are they a part of the journey with you? So how does that collaboration get better? Right now you see all these VIP doctors and longevity clinics and all these other sort of medicine popping up, right? It's been around, but now I think it's very popular. So how do we start building a relationship with patients where it feels like a team? I've been very fortunate. I've blown a lot of, I have a new shoulder. I've had multiple knee surgeries and I have to get everything redone. But I've been very fortunate to have phenomenal doctors who I have a great relationship with. And this goes back to something very important that we said earlier. How do these people feel supported, heard, and feel important?
So doctors are under a lot of pressure then, right? Because like you said, you've been fortunate enough to have a great doctor. No doctor wants to be a bad doctor at their practice. And these clinic owners aren't just faced with the surgery they're doing or the physical therapy that they're working with a patient on. They're also engaged in running payroll, training the front desk staff, doing all of these different things as a business owner. How does somebody lead better than under this kind of pressure? If we've gone through the process of breathing, we're now making better decisions. We've gone through the process of being more curious to eliminate some of the fear that we're having, that the resistance that's holding us back. How do I deal with this pressure now?
Well, listen, there's also something called reality, right? When you look at medicine today and healthcare costs and how doctors and practices are just getting squeezed left and right, that is the truth, right? So we have to deal with reality. So, and it goes back to what Mike said. Who can we talk to? It's a very tough business right now. So how are we able to automate, right? So let's go with this, right? The practice of medicine is getting more difficult as we know it today. So costs are going higher. What we can charge is going lower. What's being paid out by insurance is going lower, right? And it has been. All right, so these are the realities we have to deal with. Okay. So now in the face of this reality, what are the things we need to do to help our business, right? Let's get conscious. Do I need, and this is not a plug-in for you guys, but I think this is universal. Do I need to automate, or do I need to outsource certain things so we are able to do a better job? One, possibly see more clients, possibly spend more time with clients, and have a bigger impact. So now, as a doctor, you have to become a businessman. So how do we start implementing AI, outsourcing for soft touch, client-facing services? What do we do now, right? Because I need to change my business with the times. So it has to be a deeper discussion. Yes, there's pressure. I think there's pressure for any entrepreneur, right? And it's a very lonely, hard road sometimes. But the question is, we're still able, if we're able to take a step back, and I'm not saying for 10 weeks, have a moment, say, this is hard right now. What do I need to be doing? How do I need to be seeing? What do I need to be, who do I need to be contacting differently to help my business? Right? This is change. Yeah. You know, if, you know, I'm lucky I have a tech team at home. My kids are 13 and 15. I don't even use a computer still. I'd be dead if I had to go get a real job at a real company. I'm over. I'm toast. I'm a dinosaur. Right? But all of a sudden, you know, as I started my own company, I wasn't on social media a year and a half ago. I'm like, I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I know what it was. I'm not an idiot, but I wasn't doing anything. But now I had to adjust. So I can either do it alone, which would took me 45 years to learn, or go hire somebody, right? But what's interesting about that is now I've learned a lot in the last year and a half where I can make better decisions. And this goes back to change. So all these doctors are under pressure. Well, we know if we keep doing the same thing, nothing's going to get better, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So we have to say, what do I need to do here? What needs to change? How can I help my business? Who do I need to contact? Because, and this is all tying in, get curious of like, you know what, I may not know something right now, but let me start talking. Let me start listening. Because the solution may be right in front of you, but there's been so much pressure. We've been so stuck, we haven't had a chance to see it. I don't know if that answered the question, but.
No, I mean, it gives a perfect outline to help a physician right now who's under pressure and feeling the pressure. The 4 different questions that they can ask: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who, what, why, and how to solve the problem. And you're talking about giving them mental space in order to be able to do that, right? And so I totally agree with that.
And by the way, positive psychology won't get you out of it, right? Just thinking positive and hoping things change is a horrible, horrible recipe.
Oh,
right? That is not a good strategy whatsoever. It's called reality. Now you can have a positive attitude and think opportunistically, but you better be doing something. You better be talking to the right people. Something has to change. We can't just sit back and wish. It does take action. Yeah.
I always say
hope is a horrible strategy.
Right. one thing I will say too, a specific note is that, you know, one of the things I do when I speak to the clients, and we always talk about we do talk about this stuff all more than anything else. Is there are also a ton of Facebook groups out there. You may or may not know the people out there that's with technology is good too. So you can go to Facebook and you can type in like your specialty, and there are really good Facebook groups out there that people kind of talk amongst themselves within people in their specialty. So anybody here, if you want to, I've cultivated a list through with clients. If they want to just shoot me an email or Nathan an email, we'll just send it to you as well, because it all goes back to the basics of what Evan is talking about. And it's taking space, breathing, speaking to others, right? And this is one part of being able to get out and speak to others, of people that probably, you know what, if your remittances are smaller, right? If you're having a squeeze, or there's other people that are having the same thing. You're not special. Remember, Evan, you told me that years ago. I'm not special. I may think that my problems are special because they're mine, but it's not, right?
But
and
you
then
know,
when
it's
I start
important
talking
to
to other
just.
people, you realize they have the same issues as well.
But I think what you said is important also, being business owners and leaders and stuff like that. Support is big. And I can say, like, Mike and I have we have a very strong relationship. We've been friends for a while. We meet once a week for coffee. Now, my business is different than Mike's, but our mindsets are very similar, and how we look at things, where Michael can help me and I can help Mike, right? I can see things a little differently, but I've experienced, since I'm an entrepreneur, I experience the same pressures. They may look different, but there's still my pressures, right? So when you start talking to people that you respect, obviously, and you go through these things, it really feeds everything we're talking about here. Intentionality, curiosity, willing to change, an open mindset, right? Willing to get better. What are we trying to accomplish? So everything starts to connect, right? And that obviously is a very growth mindset, right? Which we haven't discussed. But that's one of those things, like, how do I get better? And it's reality. What is going on here? What needs to be fixed? What are we doing well? How do we get better? Right? But there's a reality to it. Listen, things come up. I wish I had an app that told me when emergencies, challenges, and obstacles were coming my way, but I don't. Right? So I really need to build a strong mental foundation that I can find my internal footing. I can make the best decision I can, which is not reactive, which is responsive, right? And really start from there. I think being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, being a doctor are very challenging professions. But you can win, right? There is a solution. There is an answer, right? It may be a little blurry sometimes, but if we're able to slow down, give ourselves that mental space, acknowledge how we feel, because it does matter, right? It's just data, really, at the end of the day. And we try to make our best decisions. We do that, consistently. We really do start to build new circuitry in the brain. And we start to build the confidence, right? Because we know we're able to, under pressure, make the best decisions we can. That's just human nature. That's human beings, whatever profession, right? The speed of decision making may be different in different professions. But if we could really have a strong sense of internal footing, right, we'll make better decisions. It's just like how you work out a bicep. This is work. The mental game is work. You have to be conscious of what you're doing, right? Little things, taking a walk, put your phone down, be in nature, let your brain breathe when you're under a lot of stress. It sounds like, what's that going to do? It's going to do something. Make sure you're sleeping, right? Make sure you have a strong evening routine where you can down regulate. Like, all these things are important if you want to be great. It just doesn't happen. It takes effort.
Yeah, they're not minor things. They're major things for us.
Yeah.
So
that's if you want to be great, Nathan, right? If you want to stay in the right-hand lane, God bless you, right? But if you want to get better, this is what it takes.
But seriously, I want to get back to one bit. I'm sorry, Nathan. I usually don't. But the one thing I want to get back to, I think the person that has all the answers, right? Let's be honest here, is Nathan. Because if everybody listening to this broadcast did say that he had a 2-hour conversation with his teenage daughter. So I think this guy right here, he has the golden keys, okay? Because I don't think I've ever had a 2-hour conversation with my teenage son, and he has a daughter. I mean, Evan,
unless you're on a long road trip and they couldn't jump out. I hear you, Mike.
I mean, let's be honest here. Talk about a humble brag there, right? I mean, we gotta be learning from this guy.
Was that 2 hours cumulative over the course of 5 weeks, or was that a one-shot deal?
No, we have pretty in-depth conversations. She's a really focused little girl. It's not anything I did. I can't take credit for that as much as I'd love to. She's a really focused little girl. But outside of that, she's trying to understand how to do different things in life and achieve certain things. And I have the wonderful pleasure of sitting on calls with people like Evan Marks and Mike Yablonowitz and getting to learn from some of the greatest top performers in different industries across different spectrums who work with top performers in different industries and different perspectives. And so that gives me the ability to share some insights that I've learned from other people like you guys.
And you know, it's interesting what you just said, Nathan, is that with your daughter, like, there is no such thing as perfection, right? If I said, Nathan, you're perfect this way, you'd be like, why? I want to get better. Like, there is no 6 feet under, you're perfectly dead, right? That's a guarantee. But if you want to get better, why in God's name do you want to be perfect? Like, you're telling me, like Nick Saban talks about this capability gap. Ev, you're doing great, man. That was perfect. I go, no, don't say that. Don't say I'm perfect. Don't say that was perfect. That means I'm done growing. Even at 53, I feel like I'm in the second inning still. Perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. How did that?
No, we're coming up here on an hour. Any kind of final thoughts for leaders that are ready to stop surviving and start growing, Evan?
How do we stop surviving and start thriving? It starts with asking yourself a couple questions. What are we trying to accomplish here? What am I trying to accomplish as a leader, as an owner? What are we trying to accomplish as a firm, right? We haven't talked about clarity at all. You have to get clear of what you're trying to accomplish, right? So once this is what we're trying to accomplish. Okay. What are the best decisions I can make day in and day out to get us there? Have to, the journey of clarity, you have to get on that. And the greatest way to do that is to ask questions, right? And those questions can be, how as a leader do I get mentally stronger? How do I make better decisions? And go and get curious. Go explore how to get better. Business can get better. You can get better. Your teams can get better. And sometimes things have to change. What's wrong with change? Change isn't bad if we do it intentionally. There's a reason why we're doing what we're doing. There's a why, and then how the hell do we do it? I mean, going back to Mike, we talk about this all the time. This is how I feel. What are we trying to accomplish? Then how are we going to do it? That's consciousness. Come up with a structure of what we're trying to do.
Foundation.
Evan, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you and have a further conversation with you about this, they needed somebody to ask them a couple of questions in order to spark that curiosity. How do they get a hold of you? How can they find you?
I'm on social media. It's Evan Marks on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, and also I have a website. It's m1performancegroup.com. That's the number one, m1performancegroup.com. I do have a discovery tab, I believe, on there. My team put a book Evan thing or something like that. So, send me a message, right? I do offer free discovery calls. It's, $45 an hour just to get to know you a little bit and see if we're a good fit. And that's how you get a hold of me. We put out content 4 times a week, and I think it's pretty dynamite. So get to know me a little bit that way first. But, listen, feel free to reach out to me. We're definitely up for a chat.
Yeah, thank you very much for being a part of the program today. I sincerely appreciate it, and we'll have to have you back on sometime.
Well, thank you for having me, gentlemen, and I'll see you next week, Mike.
All right, Mike. Well, let's wrap up here. I got a couple of thoughts, and then I let you take some of your takeaways. First and foremost, thoughts I had were: does it need to change? If it needs to change inside your business, guys, then it's time to get curious. What are you going to get curious about? What parts of your business are you going to get curious about? As you get curious, though, this fear might tend to creep in. And that fear is probably coming from some pressures that you're feeling. one of the things that SnapScale offers is support. We have support, and you can be curious about how SnapScale can help you. If you're curious at all about how SnapScale can help you, go to snapscale.com/start and book a simple discovery call with us. If you need additional teams, we'll tell you, just like Mike said, if now's not the right time to hire additional people, we can also offer some insights and answers. Not every single thing needs to be you have to add staff all the time. Sometimes it's about how to document processes or getting the right procedures lined down or identifying the area of your business that's really overly stressed. And maybe that's something that it's not an outsourcing hire you need to make. Maybe it's an insourcing hire that you need to make. And we can tell you that. All you have to do is reach out to us at snapscale.com, and we can provide some guidelines and some governance as to how to outsource without having to be stressed out about it. Mm-hmm. How to outsource to a team of people that already have compliance and have some forethought around adding that additional staff. So that was kind of my takeaways from the conversation here with Evan. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, and also I want also how do you think, because again, I do spend a lot of time speaking to our clients and our prospects, mostly about business and less about, what the VA can do. And it really does come into this whole conversation about intentionality and stress and how to be better and how to divorce yourself of, some of the tasks that stops them from doing what they want to do. And I have cultivated a list of of groups of Facebook groups for each, for ophthalmologists and physical therapists and all these sorts of other specialties. So, anybody can email me, or Nathan, you know a better way. Anybody can email me at mike@snapscale.com, but I would love to share that information with anybody that wants it, because out of everything that Evan said, and I am a proponent of, whether you call it therapy or coaching, I don't know the technical term, of just getting out of, I use the term ghetto and talking to others. It really is a huge perspective that you get from talking to others about your issues, and it really helps you do better. And you may not have the time to meet. Well, everybody has time. That's a whole other conversation. To meet with a professional coach, whether it's Evan or somebody else, but you can join a specific Facebook group, a LinkedIn group, and go through feeds when you have time and ask questions that you have, and you could get basic stuff answered. And at the end of the day, too, Nathan, you'll realize you're not alone, right? And that's the biggest thing, knowing that, you weren't the only one that, and I know you know this, but you weren't the only one that's having their fees cut, right? It's good to know that other people are living that pain as well, if that's the issue, but you never know what you're going to gain of just by being in certain groups, right? So I do believe that it's important to reach out to others, because you get that perspective that you just don't get when you're alone in your business, right? So I invite anybody to reach out to me about that, 100%. But I want to do more of these types of shows. There's a lot that we could have unpacked that we just don't have the time for, but mental acuity is tied to success, man. It just is. And, it's something that everybody should be working on and should take the time to spend on themselves, because you take the time to spend on yourself, it'll do worlds in your business. And little things like the breathing, I do breathe. I breathe because I have to live, right? But, breathe in through your nose 5 times. I'm going to screw this up, but then exhale for 8 seconds. Just that 4 or 5 times, it just does wonders for recentering you, basic recentering. That's really all I got. But I got to say how important this is for every business owner and every person to be a better person, to be a better parent. These techniques are huge. So I appreciate everybody for spending a few minutes with us, because I'm only trying to bring people on the show and content on the show that I feel will be valuable to the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll wrap up like we have the last couple of shows, where I share with the audience here, Mike, the commitment that we have to HIPAA. What I'm going to share with everybody again is our third-party auditor, and he's going to share with you what we did from a compliance standpoint to ensure we were HIPAA compliant in the lengths that we go to. So if you're concerned about patient private health information with overseas staff, I just want you to hear what this expert had to say about our organization.
Mike is an interesting example. Mr. Yablonowitz and SnapScale, previously Brobizco, or BBC Global. We don't know, HIPAA training doesn't do webinars. We don't partner with clients and help them market. My purpose of being here is not for marketing. I'm not interested in generating sales from web contacts. What I am interested in is taking information that shows up regularly and becomes problematic regularly for our clients so that you know you're conversant and know how to ask questions and know what the answer should sound like. Mike is an obsessive when it comes to compliance. The way he approached compliance when he became our customer 3 years ago was, yeah, but how do we do better? But I know what the minimums are, but you know, I've got some clients that are concerned about VAs, and what do we do to bolster, you know, Matt, honestly, how do we show up as the best in the market? And it was a year, maybe a year and a half working together on a system that didn't exist. It doesn't exist anywhere. I can tell you, we have dozens of virtual assistant platforms that work through HIPAAtraining.com, and there are probably 100 more that work through other of our peers in the industry. And the reason SnapScale is the only organization that we will do this with is because they exceeded the minimum standards, then they exceeded what were considered exceptional standards, and then they started creating their own standards that are so far and above, they're so beyond the pale that it's going to generate a new standard in what is considered remote virtual healthcare.
Is Evan still on?